The letter arrived on a Tuesday, which was the kind of day that shouldn't be allowed to change anyone's life. Bart Holloway was under a '94 Chevy Silverado when his daughter slid the envelope across the concrete floor toward him. He saw her sneakers first, the left one with the fraying lace she'd refused to let him replace, and then the white corner of the envelope nudging up against his wrench. "It came certified," Ellie said. "I had to sign." He rolled out on the creeper. Ellie was 11, standing in the garage doorway with the afternoon sun behind her, and for a half-second she looked so much like her mother that something in his chest did that familiar thing it always did. He took the envelope. The return address said Vantage Precision Group. He sat up slowly and read it twice. Vantage made aerospace components, actuator assemblies, pressure sensors, the kind of parts that had to work the first time, and every time after that. They were based out of Huntsville, Alabama, and they had a contract with the Department of Defense that was, depending on which trade publication you read, worth somewhere between $200 and $400 million. Bart knew this because he'd spent 3 years working for a subcontractor that supplied Vantage with machined housings, back before the layoffs. The letter said that one of Vantage's primary assembly lines had been producing defective actuator units. 47 of them had already shipped to a government warehouse in Virginia. An independent auditor had traced the defect signature back through the supply chain, and Bart's name had come up. Not as a suspect, as a possible source of help. The letter was signed by a man named Reginald Solberg, who held the title of Director of Quality Assurance. Bart set the letter on the workbench, picked up his wrench, and rolled back under the Silverado. "Dad," Ellie said. "I know. Are you going to call them?" He tightened the bolt he'd been working on. The torque felt right. He moved to the next one. "Dad, give me a minute, Ellie." She gave him the minute. She always did. That was one of the things about her. She had her mother's patience and none of her mother's tolerance for being ignored past a reasonable point. "It's a lot of money," she said, when the minute was up. She'd read the letter. Of course she had. "It's a consulting offer," he said. "That's different from a job. It says they'll pay you $800 a day." He rolled back out, looked at her. "For however long it takes," she added. "That's what it says." $800 a day was more than Bart cleared in a week at the shop. The shop was his, or mostly his, and the rest belonged to a small business loan that had another 4 years left on it. He did oil changes and brake jobs and transmission work for people who drove old trucks and older Subarus and couldn't afford to take them to the dealers. He was good at it. He was better than good. But good didn't keep the furnace from needing a new heat exchanger last February, and good hadn't prevented the conversation with Ellie's school about the overdue activity fees. He took a breath, let it out. "Go wash up," he said. "I'll start dinner." He called Reginald Solberg the next morning, after Ellie left for school. The voice on the phone was smooth and carefully neutral. The voice of a man who had learned to manage conversations the way you managed project timelines, with milestones and controlled information release. "Mr. Holloway, thank you for returning our call. Your letter," Bart said. It was a letter. A small pause. "Of course, thank you for calling. We'd like to fly you to Huntsville to look at the line. Tell me about the defect first." Another pause, longer. "We'd prefer to brief you in person." "I'm sure you would," Bart said. "But I've got a shop to run and a daughter to feed, and I'm not going to spend a day of my time traveling somewhere if I can figure out in the next 10 minutes whether I can help you or not. So, tell me about the defect." Reginald Solberg told him about the defect. The actuator units were failing a pressure retention test at a rate of about 1 in 12. The failures weren't catastrophic. The units didn't break. They just bled down to below-spec pressure over a 24-hour hold period. The internal team had been chasing it for 6 weeks. They'd replaced seals, adjusted torque specs on the cap assemblies, changed suppliers on 2 components. Nothing had moved the needle. Bart listened. He didn't say anything for a while after Solberg finished. "What's your bore finish spec on the cylinder wall?" he said. Silence. "Mr. Holloway, raw value." What's your surface roughness target? More silence. Then, I'd have to pull the print. Pull the print, he heard papers, voices in the background, the particular hushed urgency of people in a room trying not to look panicked. 32 Ra, Solberg said finally. Plus or minus 8. Bart was quiet for a moment. When did you switch machine shops for the cylinder bodies? The silence this time was the kind that told him everything. About 8 months ago, Solberg said. Right, Bart said. I'll come to Huntsville. The Vantage facility was the size of 4 football fields under one roof, climate-controlled and brighter than daylight, and it smelled like coolant and metal, and the specific industrial cleanliness that meant someone was paying attention. Bart noticed that first. A dirty shop hid problems. A clean shop had different ones. Reginald Solberg met him at the entrance. He was younger than his voice, maybe 40, with the groomed look of someone who had moved from engineering into management and was still adjusting to wearing better shoes. He shook Bart's hand firmly. We appreciate you coming, he said. Behind him, slightly off to one side, stood a man named Dwight Hardcastle. Hardcastle was Vantage's vice president of manufacturing, and he had the bearing of someone who had not been consulted before the letter went out to Bart Holloway and was making his feelings about that known through posture alone. He was probably 55. His handshake was the kind that tries to establish something. You're the machinist, Hardcastle said. Retired from machining, Bart said. I run a repair shop now. Hardcastle's expression did a small, controlled thing. Right. Well, our team has been over this line 6 ways from Sunday. But Reginald thought. He stopped. We thought it would be useful to get a fresh set of eyes. Show me the cylinder bodies before they go into assembly, Bart said. Hardcastle looked at Solberg. Solberg said, Of course, the cylinder bodies came from a supplier in Georgia called Meridian Fabrication. They arrived in foam-lined trays, individually wrapped, and they looked perfect. That was the first thing. They had the silver-gray sheen of freshly machined aluminum, no visible tool marks, no obvious defects. Bart picked one up. He turned it in the light. He didn't say anything for almost 2 full minutes. They pass incoming inspection, Hardcastle said from behind him. What does your incoming inspection consist of? Dimensional check, visual, CMM on every 5th piece. Bart set the part down. He asked for a profilometer. Hardcastle said they had one in the quality lab. They went to the quality lab. Bart ran the profilometer stylus along the bore of the cylinder body, watched the readout, ran it again at a different orientation. Then a third time, rotated 90 degrees from the second. The raw values were 29, 31, and 47. He set the instrument down. There it is, he said. Solberg leaned in to look at the readout. The third reading is out of spec. The third reading is in a different direction than the tool path, Bart said. Your new supplier is using a different cutting strategy than your old one. The tool paths are running mostly with the grain of the metal, which gives you good roughness numbers in one axis and garbage numbers in the perpendicular. So your incoming CMM checks pass, your visual checks pass, your roughness checks pass. If you're checking in the same direction the tool ran, but the seals are running in a circular path. They're seeing the perpendicular surface. He picked up the cylinder body again. Your seals are riding over a surface that feels like corduroy to them, he said. Not smooth like they're supposed to. Every time the unit pressurizes and holds, the seal is working against a surface it wasn't designed for. Most of the time it holds. 1 in 12 times, over 24 hours, it bleeds down. The room was quiet. Hardcastle said, Our supplier passed all the qualification samples. Your qualification samples were probably run in a different orientation, or by hand, or both, Bart said. First articles often are. It's a different program than the production run. More silence. Solberg said, Can it be fixed? You need to requalify the supplier with a revised surface finish callout that specifies raw in multiple axes. In the meantime, you need to sort your existing inventory. You can cull the bad ones with a profilometer check at incoming, full population, until Meridian gets their process corrected. You're looking at maybe a week to get the sort process running. The supplier fix will take longer. Couple months probably. Hardcastle said, "We've had engineers from 3 different firms look at this." Bart picked up his notebook. He'd written 4 lines in it. "I know," he said. "Your letter mentioned that." What happened next was not immediate. It rarely was. Hardcastle brought in the engineering team that afternoon. 6 people, all of them with degrees from schools with football programs you could name. All of them polite in the way that people are polite when they've been told to be, and not because they feel it. They asked Bart questions for 2 hours. Good questions, mostly. A few of them were clearly trying to find the hole in his reasoning. They didn't find one because there wasn't one. The lead engineer, a woman named Dr. Patricia Ossie, sat across from him at the conference table and looked at the profilometer data he'd gathered and said, quietly, "We checked surface finish. I know we did in one axis," Bart said. She was quiet for a moment. "I'd have to pull the records. Pull the records." She pulled the records. One axis. Every single check. She sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Bart almost smiled. Dr. Ossie, he would later learn, had 2 master's degrees and was working on a PhD at night. She was also, unlike Hardcastle, not the kind of person who protected her ego at the expense of the problem. She asked him 3 more questions after that, and they were the best questions anyone had asked him all day. "How did you know to check multiple axes?" she said. "Because SEALs don't care about your toolpath," Bart said. "They care about what they touch." She wrote that down. He called Ellie that evening from the hotel room. "How did it go?" she asked. She was doing homework. He could hear the particular distracted quality in her voice that meant she was reading something while she talked to him. "Okay," he said. "Did you find it?" "Yeah." "Were they surprised?" He looked out the window at the parking lot. A few lights on in the building across the way. Some kind of office. "Some of them," he said. Ellie was quiet for a moment. "Then Mom would have said something funny right now." "She would have," he said. "Something good. I can't think of what, though." "Me neither. It's been a while." He heard her set down her pencil. Just that, the small click of it on the desk. "Come home soon," she said. 2 more days, he said. "Maybe 3. "Okay. Ellie? Yeah? You good?" A small pause, the kind that wasn't worry but something more like consideration. "Yeah, Dad. I'm good." On his second day at Vantage, things shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way things shifted in movies, with a confrontation in a hallway and raised voices. It was quieter than that, and more uncomfortable. Hardcastle came to him in the morning, before the engineering team arrived, and closed the door of the small conference room where Bart had been reviewing supplier documentation. "I want to be direct with you," Hardcastle said. "All right," Bart said. "The path forward you've described, the supplier requalification, the incoming sort, that's going to cost us time and money, and it's going to involve some uncomfortable conversations with Meridian, who we have a long-standing relationship with." Bart waited. "There's another option," Hardcastle said. "We could tighten the seal material spec instead. Go to a higher durometer compound that's more forgiving of surface variation. It's faster and it doesn't require us to go back to the supplier." Bart looked at him for a moment. "That's a band-aid," he said. "It's a practical solution. It doesn't fix the surface. It just puts a tougher seal against the same bad surface. You'll reduce your failure rate, but you won't eliminate it. And a tougher seal material has different cold temperature behavior. You want to be sure about that before it goes into an aerospace application." Hardcastle said nothing. "I'll put that in my report either way," Bart said. "Both options, the trade-offs, my recommendation. What you do with it is your decision." Hardcastle studied him. "You're very direct. You said you wanted to be direct." A moment. Then Hardcastle said, "The board is going to want to know where the failure was. Who missed it?" And there it was. Bart understood then. This was the part that wasn't about the actuators at all. "My report will describe the failure mode and the process gap," Bart said. "I'm not in the business of assigning blame to individuals. If there's a process that let this get through incoming inspection, that's a process problem. I'll describe the process." Hardcastle looked at him with something that wasn't quite respect and wasn't quite relief, something in between. "Fair enough," he said and left. Dr. Osi found him at lunch, eating a sandwich from the vending machine in the break room because he hadn't had time to go out. She sat down across from him with a coffee she didn't seem to be drinking, just holding. "Hardcastle talked to you," she said. "Not a question." "This morning," Bart said. "He's worried about the post-mortem. He signed off on the Meridian qualification." Bart looked at her. "I'm telling you that," she said, "because I think you should know the context, not because I'm asking you to do anything with it." "I know what I'm going to write," he said. She nodded. "Good." She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead. The letter said you ran a subcontractor shop here before. Why'd you leave precision manufacturing?" He thought about how to answer that. "My wife got sick," he said. "She needed more time than the job would allow. So I opened the repair shop. I could set my own hours, be home when I needed to be." Osi looked at him steadily, not with pity, with something more like recognition. "I'm sorry," she said. "My daughter was 7, he said. She's 11 now. Good kid. I don't doubt it," Osi said. She finally drank some of her coffee. "You gave up a career in precision work to take care of your family." "I gave up a job," Bart said. "Not the knowledge." She smiled briefly but genuinely. "No, not the knowledge." His report was 31 pages long. He wrote it at the hotel desk over 2 evenings, and he was careful with every sentence. He described the failure mode in detail, the anisotropic surface finish, the incoming inspection gap, the statistical pattern of the failures, as consistent with a seal surface interaction rather than a material defect. He described both remediation paths with their respective trade-offs. He made his recommendation clearly and without hedging. He described the process gap in 1 paragraph at the end of the technical section. No names. The incoming inspection procedure had not specified measurement orientation. That was the sentence. That was what needed to change. He sent it to Solberg at 11:30 on a Wednesday night. By 8 the next morning, Solberg had forwarded it to the executive team. By 10, Bart was in a conference room with 7 people he hadn't met before, including a woman named Mrs. Lorraine Whitfield, who was Vantage's CEO, and who had flown in from their parent company's office in Atlanta that morning. She was not what he'd expected. She was somewhere in her 60s, with the kind of precise economy of movement that came from decades of learning not to waste anything. She read through the key sections of his report while the room waited, and she read them the way someone reads something when they actually want to understand it. Then she looked up at Bart. "You found this in 2 days," she said. "The data was there," he said. "It just needed someone to measure it in a different direction." 6 weeks, she said. 6 weeks and 3 outside firms. "They were looking for the right thing," Bart said. "They just had an assumption about where to look." Whitfield looked at him for a moment. "What assumption?" "That the surface finish was either in spec or out of spec. A binary condition. They weren't thinking about it as a directional property." She nodded slowly. "And you were. I've run seals against bores a lot of times," he said. "I know what they care about." The room was quiet. Whitfield said, "Mr. Holloway, I'd like to offer you a consulting arrangement with Vantage, not a one-time engagement. An ongoing relationship at a rate we'll discuss to work with our quality team on complex failure analysis." Bart glanced at Dr. O.C., who was sitting to his left and looking at the table with the neutral expression of someone who had been hoping something like this would happen. "I have a shop," Bart said. "I know," Whitfield said. "The arrangement would be designed to accommodate that." He thought of Ellie, and the fraying shoelace, and the heat exchanger, and the school fees. He thought of the 47 actuator units sitting in a government warehouse in Virginia that had been built wrong and shipped anyway. "I'd need to bring in someone part-time to cover the shop when I'm traveling," he said. "That's between you and us," Whitfield said. "And I'll need full access to documentation when I'm on an engagement." "I can't do this halfway," agreed. "And my reports say what the data says, not what's convenient." Something moved across Lorraine Whitfield's face that might have been the beginning of a smile. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "that is precisely why you're in this room." He called Ellie from the airport. She was at school. He got her voicemail and left a message, the kind that was too long and slightly rambling, because he always talked too much when he left voicemails for her, and she always listened to them anyway. He said that things had gone well. He said he'd explain the details over dinner. He said he'd be home by 7, and she should think about what she wanted for dinner because he was stopping at the grocery store. Then he said, "I think your mom would have had something funny to say about all of this. Something about how it figures that the thing saving us was just knowing which direction to measure. I can't think of what exactly, but she would have had the right words." He paused. "I'm coming home," he said. 7 o'clock. Think about dinner." He hung up and sat in the terminal with the noise of the airport around him, and he thought about a woman who had been good with words, and a shop that smelled like motor oil, and a kid with a fraying shoelace on her left sneaker, and the way certain things you know don't leave you just because the world stops asking for them. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at the shop. Not certified this time. Just a regular envelope, Vantage Precision Group in the corner. Inside was the signed consulting agreement and a first check, a retainer, covering the initial 30 days. Bart was at the workbench when Ellie brought it in. He opened it, read it, set it down next to a crankshaft he was measuring. Ellie was looking at the check. "Is that a lot?" she said. "Yeah," he said. "That's a lot." She looked up at him. "What does it mean?" He thought about that for a moment. "It means you can get new laces for that shoe," he said. Ellie looked at him with the flat expression she reserved for when she thought he was being evasive in a way that was also slightly annoying. "Dad, it means we're okay," he said. "More okay than we've been in a while." She looked at the check again, then at him. "Mom would have said something good right now," she said. "I keep thinking I'll remember what." "Me too," he said. He put the check in the drawer, under the workbench, where he kept things he needed to deal with later, and picked up his caliper and went back to measuring. The crankshaft was 4/1000ths out at the main journal. It had been sitting there being wrong for however long it had been wrong, waiting for someone to look at it correctly. He wrote the number down and kept going.